Hi, everyone. I'm Avi Rajagopal, editor-in-chief of Metropolis, and I have here with me today a special guest, Michael DiTullo, who is a designer and creative director, to talk about acoustic solutions from Kirei that not only push the boundaries of innovation, but are also extremely sensitive to their impact on people and planet. Michael, such a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Avi, always wonderful to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Michael, give me an introduction to Kirei. What's the story behind the brand and the products?
So, Kirei, for the last 20 plus years, has been bringing architectural products to market that have a real environmental focus, right? So, from the company's very beginning, it was all about how do we bring more sustainable products into architectural environments. Um, and that kind of evolved into how do we bring more recycled content into those environments, right? So, you think about a product like PET, which is Kirei's kind of main product. A water bottle lasts 5 minutes out in the world, but if we can then turn that into an architectural product, that might last 10, 20 years serving its purpose as an acoustic architectural product. So I think this is kind of wonderful focus on taking things out of the waste stream and bringing them into a new product type that has real kind of longevity. So we're really keeping it out of the waste stream for a decade or two or more.
Of course, that's the baseline really of what you do at Kirei, which is
Yeah.
so incredible. At the basis, you're extending the life cycle of PET, waste PET, taking it out of waste streams, as you said. But then you layer into that so many amazing things, whether that's taking on waste streams from other industries, whether it's thinking deeply about, printing and pattern and things like that, but also, of course, thinking about acoustic technologies. So I'm going to take those by turn. Let's talk about your Air Baffle made with Nike Grind, which I think is such a great case study of two industries kind of collaborating. Tell us about that product.
Well, I probably have an unusual background for someone who designs architectural products. I spent about 8 years at Nike as a footwear designer, first in Nike sportswear, and then as a designer. I was the 13th designer ever in Jordan, working directly with Michael Jordan. And then my last role there was as design director for Converse after they purchased Converse. And so I was obviously very familiar with something called the Nike Grind program. So in every Nike store, there's a grind bin, right? So you can bring in any shoes, not just Nikes, that are kind of past their usable lifespan as a piece of footwear, because all footwear just naturally wears out, and drop them off there. And they centralize everything, they process it, and they use a lot of that reground, specifically the rubber and the foam compounds in things like tracks for schools, and sometimes it goes back into Nikes themselves. But the upper materials, the textiles, those are shredded and processed into a product called fluff. It looks like fluff, and there's never really been a great secondary application for that material. So it had been building up. We're always trying to up ourselves with Kirei. Every launch, we're like, how do we outdo the last one? And I was like, how do we make the most sound absorbing product ever? We need something soft and non-linear inside of the PET, because the PET does a great job of absorbing kind of higher and mid frequencies just because of the spongy kind of makeup of it. But if we could have more air, more space, more nonlinear material, we'll eat up more mid and lower frequencies. And so I reached out to some old colleagues at Nike. I explained it to them, and I thought it was going to be a long pitch process, but they were like, "This is awesome. We love it. Like, we'll send you pallets of it so you can experiment." Um, and we had this really wonderful relationship. And for me, it was extra special because it like kind of closed the loop, pardon the pun, on this kind of like designing footwear and then finding a secondary home for it in an architectural product that's really high performance. And then we did some really fun things where, one of the key principles that we were always taught in design at Nike was how do you take function and make it visible, and not only make it visible, but exaggerate it and make it the design, right? And probably the case in point for that is Nike Air, right? You're exposing the cushioning technology. And so I wanted to do kind of the same thing. I wanted to expose the sound absorbing technology. And I designed this acrylic window, which is recycled acrylic, so that you could see into the fluff. And that window is the same shape and proportion as the Air Max 1, which is the first shoe, the first Nike that ever had an air bubble. Um, and just, sometimes you plan things, sometimes they happen for you. The Air Baffle launched on the 25th anniversary of the Air Max 1, and they re-released the shoe at the same time. So we did a really wonderful ad campaign. I creative directed, having someone do a handstand with wearing Air Max 1s in front of the Air Baffles. So you could just really tell that story. And I remember, obviously Nike had to approve all the materials, and the feedback that we got from the brand team at Nike was like, it feels like we made this campaign. And that was the biggest compliment to us, because I'm like, if a $50 billion company was like, this looks like a campaign we would make, that made me feel good.
Recently you launched your tessellate pendants in Baffle, which I think also pushed the boundaries in a similar way. Can you talk about that?
I think designers tend to go into two camps. Like they tend to either be like, leave me alone and let me do my thing, or they tend to be highly collaborative. And I'm definitely in that second camp. Like I love working with people. I love talking to engineers, and I love talking to our customers so I could better understand what they need. And I've been doing this for more than 25 years, so I know like the good ideas aren't going to come from me, but I'm really good at, I think, spotting a good idea. And so we have this kind of organized process at Kirei, just like a very nice design process that allows us time to experiment and play. And the very first kind of part of that process we call Gate Zero. And a representative from every single department, sales, operations, marketing, production, is there at that session, and everyone can bring ideas from their teams. And so the head of production had brought this little experiment that he made, just like a tiny little experiment of like scoring PET. And so it would kind of pop into a shape like origami. And I was like, oh my God, this is super interesting. Let me play with this. And like, so we cut out some big sheets with the pattern, and I just started like rolling it into a cylinder. And I was just like, I've just never seen anything like this, turning a two-dimensional material into something incredibly three-dimensional with a lot of light play at scale. And so we developed the horizontal baffle, and actually the founder of Kirei, John Stein, was, we were reviewing the initial prototypes, and he was like, what if we turned it vertically? Is that anything? I'm like, oh yeah, like that's, no one's done that. No one has done like a vertical acoustic treatment. That's super interesting. And then the way that's going to play with HVAC and lighting, like that's just going to be so much fun for designers to play with. And
That's fantastic because, of course, you know, and to have every piece be high performing, a perfect complement in its environment is so great. Uh, Last year, Kirei was acquired by Carnegie, and now you're part of their Materials That Matter family. Can you talk about Materials That Matter and how Kirei fits into these kind of responsible solutions?
yeah, I've actually lived through a lot of acquisitions in my career. At Nike, I was a part of the team that moved over to be leadership at Converse after that acquisition. When I was at Sound United, it was an acquisition based company, so we were always acquiring new brands. And I don't think I've ever experienced an acquisition like this where the values were so aligned at day one. Because Kirei was founded to be, an environmental company, but so was Carnegie, and Carnegie's a B Corp, so ahead of Kirei in a lot of ways. And so I think for me and the product team and the marketing team, we're like, this is just such an amazing opportunity to be a part of a bigger company. And there's things I can't talk about that we're working on together that I think are going to be, obviously as a designer, it's like the thing you're working on now is the thing you're in love with, but I can't wait to show you things in the next 10 months that are going to come from these teams kind of working together. Um, and I think just to be a part of a bigger acoustic product portfolio now. I think another really cool thing I really like about Carnegie, in addition to kind of sustainability being a part of every conversation, is the fact that they have an internal design services team. Because a lot of times, like I said, we're making new Lego pieces, and it's not always obvious how to use those new pieces. So the fact that an architect or an interior designer can work with the internal team to be like, hey, I have this ceiling, do you have any ideas? And like that team who is super educated on the products can be like, oh yeah, here you can use the tessellate pendant like this on this ceiling. That's like really exciting. So long story short, we just have a lot more tools to play with, and I feel like my sandbox as a creative got a lot bigger.
Michael, that's so exciting. I know you're bringing new solutions to market all the time. And in fact, you have some new products that have just come out recently, EchoLine and EchoScreen. Can you talk about that?
In talking about the Air Baffle and Tessellate, you get the sense that we're always kind of pushing the boundaries and trying to figure out like, how do we one up ourselves, how do we push ourselves? And that's awesome. But sometimes also as a designer and someone who focuses on product, you have to really think about how do you level up, which is the name of the launch, how do you level up your most basic products? And so for the past 5 years that I've been working with Kirei, we haven't really touched our basic wall panels and screen dividers. And so in one of our early brainstorms, we had this idea of like, what if we focused a launch just on that, so it didn't get lost in other things. And for me, I love constraints. As a designer, it's like being an Olympic swimmer. Like you need the wall to push off of. And sometimes a good constraint is like that wall where you get to push. And so I'm like, okay, I'm only going to design panels and screens, which are basically hanging panels. And I'm like, how do I do things that have never been done before? So we're doing really unique CNC cuts into the panels to create these amazing repeat patterns, and then combining that with ink, right? Which we just launched Kirei Ink, the digital printing platform. And I'm like, oh, well, now that we can do these custom cuts, we can custom print and do like selective wood prints, selective materials, gradients that we're then cutting through back to the base material. And so by having this really kind of constrained launch, I was able to go so deep and be like, figure out every permutation of how we could produce these wall panels. And the same with screens. Like so many PET screens are just like a rectangle with some shapes cut out. And we're like destroying the rectangle with these really beautiful organic shapes that again we're like printing back through with gradients and then cutting into. Um, and they're just, I think, obviously I'm biased, but they're stunning. And in a way, it's, to me as a designer, it's a real triumph when you can bring that level of design to something that was kind of considered a standard or a basic product. And I'm so excited to see what architects and interior designers do with these. And you can, I love naming the products, and you can. There's definitely a little bit of code into the names. One of the panels is called Cloud City, another is called Emerald City. Obviously there's some references there that if you'll pick up on the aesthetic references too. Um, and so I don't know, I love just kind of telling those little deep stories and giving kind of winks and nods in the things that we develop.
Michael, it's been such a pleasure talking to you about acoustics, about innovation, about bringing new solutions to market, leveraging the power of partnerships to improve impact, both in terms of aesthetics experience, but also, of course, on people and the planet. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If all of you who are listening to us, watching us today, if you want to find out more about what Kirei can do for your projects and for your spaces, head on over to kireiusa.com. That's KIREIUSA.com. Thank you again, Michael, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.